Blah blah. Oh. Hello, and welcome again, my beautiful audience. This is another episode of Pop Talk, brought to you by So to Speak. I'm your host, Cody MacDonald, and today I am joined again by yet another actor. His name is Michael Lake. How are you today?
Good, thanks. I like the yet another actor. There's too many of them.
Yeah, I guess the chain is going to break next week. I think I have Lyle on the show, so I'll continue it after. I think
Nice.
it's I only know a handful of actors. I know a handful of actresses as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? It's nice. It's nice.
Yeah.
How are you doing during this disgusting weather outside? Disgusting humid weather, I should say.
Yeah, it was really muggy out there for a couple days. It seems to have cooled down a little bit today, but I haven't gone outside. I've just been kind of proactively focused on a few things I had to do online today, but I'm doing all right, all things considered.
I don't think you were missing too much outside. I think we had our first legit downpour today. It was nice. It looked like spring almost out there because of the
Oh,
rain.
nice. Yeah. I haven't put
But
away my snow shovel just yet, just in case. You never know.
you never know, yeah. I mean, we've gotten maybe like two last blows of wind this year. It's
Yeah.
like right when you think it's like right when you think we're easing into summer, it's like we get one more gust of wind, and I don't mind that because I think I've said it before on the show. I love spring and I love fall, so I don't mind. I just hate the humidity.
Yeah, I'm with you on that actually. The sort of more middle seasons where things are not so
Mhm.
extreme, those are my favorites too.
Yeah, exactly. So you are an actor as well. I want to avoid asking the same questions that I asked Hunter last week, but speaking of the movie that we're going to be talking about today, have
Yeah.
you played a variety of characters, either more comedy oriented and more dramatic oriented? Do you kind of go back and forth?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of do. I feel like I'm lucky enough to kind of work on whatever projects I get asked to do. So I really like, yeah, like whenever an opportunity comes my way, I tend to take it. Yeah, I love both ends of the spectrum. I like working on really sort of darker, heavier, dramatic stuff, but I'm also happy to, break it up a bit and, do something with a bit of levity. Sometimes I mean, the saying goes that it is harder to do comedy.
Yeah.
So sometimes sometimes I feel like it is a bit more of a task, but yeah, I love doing it both, and like I feel like when you're working with good people, everything just goes so much smoother.
Yeah, you've had a lot of experience with directors that sort of just let you have your own voice and your own ideas brought to
hmm
the table.
Yeah, that is something I value in a collaborator.
Yeah.
The ability to be met halfway and like having someone value your input is really really important to me. You don't always have to take my suggestion, but I'd like for the option to be there if it yeah.
Well, it's always a help me, help you situation. And when it comes to me, it's not only just about trying to tell your cast what to do, it's all about trying to encourage them to find that character.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's always missing sometimes. There's certain directors where they feel like they're just discarding a lot of ideas. It's all their ego and they're kind of blindsided. It's usually writer directors that I come into that problem because they have their vision and they just feel like if anything comes in the way, they're just going to completely shut it down. But they don't know that like film is always this natural changing thing, you know, from the second anybody writes leading all the way to the final cut of the movie, your film has changed drastically. There's no doubt.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Out of all the performances that you've done, do you think there are ones that you've actually adapted any sort of techniques of your own, whether it's like method acting or do you carry any sort of techniques when you go between a dramatic or a comedic performance?
I like to I like to know a lot about the character as I possibly can. So I'll usually try to have a discussion with someone about like where this guy is coming from, like what his motives are, whether there's like some sort of character reference I can look up, something I can study.
You basically like to focus on the breakdown of the character. Yeah.
Yeah. Just knowing enough about him as possible so that can present on the screen.
Yeah.
And I always like to ask about like specific lines or kind of what the feeling is or what the vibe should be or like blocking or how I carry myself or whatever. I am pretty zen about the whole filmmaking experience because I know from a long time doing it that like you're setting yourself up for like 12, 14-hour days. So
Yeah.
I try to really stay in the moment. I try to really stay present and grounded. There are, of course, going to be times where you're not sitting right in front of the camera, so I try to find something to do or someone to talk to, or just something that can stay like kind of keep me on pace for the day.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I have not met you in person yet. I yet to have that happen yet. We've
Yeah,
only met through a circle of our mutual friends, but I've seen you in a theatrical film recently, Edwin.
that's true. Yeah.
And it's basically about a guy who is writing a book and he's deeply disturbed, and that's saying it lightly.
hmm
And the whole film is basically, are we watching on screen what he's writing, what's in his mind, or are we watching his deranged life being displayed on screen because he has no recollection of like abducting people, and he has a very intense relationship with his girlfriend. And I have to say, man, it was you played a very unhinged person in this, and
Yeah.
I think what also encompassed that, and it's something I told you in text, was your friend. I forget his name. My mistake.
Stuart G.
The one who,
Robertson.
yeah, he definitely has like a flair of Gaspar Noé and Nicholas Winding Refn in terms of his lighting, because it's constantly red throughout the whole movie, and it just has like this nightmare aesthetic to it, and it's really enthralling, and I was happy enough to watch it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And the way that it's funny, I've rarely heard plot described back to me. Usually people are asking me, like, what is Edwin about? But the way you gave a really apt, succinct, intriguing summary of it. So that's great.
Well,
Yeah.
it was a film that like is sort of the films that I love watching, or the ones that I would love to make someday. Is that there's sort of this balance between like abstract and literal, and is it art or is it entertainment? It's sort of like trying to find that nice middle ground, because there are
Yeah.
just an audience out there. They either want something explained or they want to find out for themselves. So they're always like there is that nice middle ground out there with a lot of films. Yeah. Well, actually, it was before I even watched Edwin. I recall sending you one of my short films, and
hmm
it's funny when I was just asking you about comedic roles, is because this little short film that I have is primarily a dark comedy. When I was looking over your demo reel, and I'm kind of looking at you through, when we're doing trivia night with the guys and all that, I'm kind
Yeah.
of looking at you like, I see you as this character, and I kind of had in mind while I was writing it sort of a deadpan Bill Murray sort of
Yeah.
expression. And
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
sent me your audition tape, I was like, I got him. I got this guy. Because like that, there was like that moment where you had that transformation between being all like jokey with the main character, the girlfriend, and then when you realize that she's being serious, you sort of just like you drop your mood and you're like, wait, what's happening? And you just sort of had this dumbfound expression on your face, and it just reminded me of like Bill Murray, like when he's like no expression on his face, and he's just like,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. I love when I mean, this is gonna feed well into what movie we're talking about today, but I love when the
mhm.
genres are a little bit blurred like that. Like, obviously, there are films that are broadly comedic, kind of slapstick, and obviously, there are films that are very, very serious. But, like, when you get the opportunity as an actor to do something that kind of blurs those lines a little bit, like where you get to kind of play a more serious character, but the things you're saying are kind of ridiculous, like, that can be really, really fun.
Yeah.
When the truth, the honesty of that character is super serious to them, but it's meant to be like funny to the audience, like that.
Well,
That
you can
yeah,
you can read it either way. That's sort of
yeah,
the art behind it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, that I guess that sort of takes us into the film that we're going to talk about today, because it's starring an actor who I guess we'll talk about briefly, but it's starring an actor who's primarily known as being a crazy maniac, persona on screen, but this is his first time where he dips his pen in the dramatic territory, and that is the 1998 film The Truman Show, directed by Peter Weir, and it stars Jim Carrey, Laura Linney, Noah Emmerich, Natasha McAlone, and of course Ed Harris. And the logline reads: Jim Carrey plays Truman Burbank, a cheerful man living an ordinary life in the fictional town of Sea Haven. He has no idea that his whole life is being broadcast 24/7 on this reality show that's shown to the entire world. And the week when he turns 30 years old, or I should say the 30th season of the show, he slowly starts to pick up what his life really is. Yeah, it stars Jim Carrey, and like we said before, like he's a eccentric actor that's primarily known for, at the time, the Ace Ventura movies, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, The Cable Guy, and I think the same year, or maybe a year before, he was just in Liar Liar. So it was kind of a daring move on him to step into this to step his toe into this, because people didn't know if we can take him seriously or not. And
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking about this like kind of now. A lot of the big comedic actors, whether they're known from other movies or some Comedy Central show or like whatever, like a lot of the actors do have that like one indie project where they just sort of take that venture into dramatic territory, and it's like almost expected of like a sitcom actor at a certain point to just tackle a vastly different role. And the way that Jim Carrey had done those first kind of 4 or 5 films that made him explode and then took a step into this territory was very kind of like left field. I feel like it must have been received like really differently at the time.
yeah, and he wasn't nominated for an Academy Award, but he did win Golden Globe for Best Actor.
Yeah.
And later on, I think when he'd won the Golden Globe for like Man on the Moon and maybe The Majestic, I'm not sure. Did he win? Did he win for Eternal Sunshine?
Oh, I'm not sure actually.
Well, he won numerous times, and then finally, when he got on stage at one point, he just yelled out, "Am I just the Tom Hanks of the Golden Globes, or what?" And I think it like cut to Tom Hanks, and he was dying laughing.
That is funny. I don't think I've ever seen that. I have noticed in recent years that he is like, regardless of the quality he's putting out the work in that given year, like he is always one of the highlights of any awards show he's at.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I remember one time.
Yeah.
What's the award called at the Oscars where they're honoring someone's body of work and they come on stage?
The Cecil DeMille one?
Like a lifetime achievement. Yeah, that's probably what it is. And he was doing an impression of Blake Edwards, talking about how much like he inspired him growing up, and then he gave it to him. And then they do like this bit where Blake Edwards comes on stage in a wheelchair and it malfunctions and just goes flying across the stage and it breaks into like a fake wall. Yeah. And he's like doing a whole play on the Pink Panther, and Jim Carrey's like, "I can't believe this is happening on the greatest night of his life."
That's fun. I think I remember seeing that. That's good.
Yeah. So, tell me, when was the first time that you watched The Truman Show? And what were your first thoughts?
So, it came out in 1998, so I would not have seen it then. But I feel like I probably would have seen it in maybe like the mid-2000s or so. I feel like we probably rented it from somewhere when I was a kid. I remember it just kicked my hyperactive young imagination into hyperdrive. Like I just started thinking about, as was often the tendency when I was a kid watching a movie that high concept, just like what if that was reality? I just got to thinking, what if there is a Michael show? Like what if this is real? That was basically my response. And I think that's really the most effective, interesting thing that a high concept movie like that can do.
Yeah. I kind of share the same testaments, really. Yeah. I saw this at a very young age, and I was always on the lookout for hidden cameras, thinking I was being watched, and is the world revolving around me? Because it was one of those first movies where it made you think.
Absolutely. As you know, as a young kid, the world kind of feels like it does revolve around you. Like you have people in your life who are usually orchestrating everything you have to do, and you're kind of... You kind of maybe don't understand the gravity of that when you're really young, and then as you get to grow a bit older, as you reach a certain age, like you kind of assume your own responsibilities in the world. But I think all of us are susceptible to having some sort of detachment at one point, just being like, "What am I doing here? Like, what is this all for?"
Well, it's sort of like what Christoph's character, Ed Harris's character, says in the movie. That line where it's like, we accept the reality of the world that is presented to us. Mm-hmm. And we don't sort of question our existence. We just sort of live through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is actually the first movie that ever made me cry as a kid. Mm. There's numerous parts, and even to this day, like when Truman is reunited with his father, and then at the end where Truman rams his ship into the side of the wall in the facility that he's in, and when he touches it and he starts hitting it, and just like that music, it hit me on an emotional level back then, because back then I was just so used to Jim Carrey being, who he was, like the crazy, entertaining madman that he is.
Yeah.
But it was a profound performance because it took me a while to get adjusted to the fact that it's Jim Carrey. It took me a while to, like,
Yeah.
I had to erase all the history that I have on this man's face and just look at it. And him as Truman Burbank is like perfectly cast.
Oh, for sure. The way that they kind of make him this very ordinary guy who's just occasionally prone to the odd, quirky kind of outburst is so brilliant. Like they make him
Yeah.
such a they give him a very kind of nondescript job. Like he's an insurance salesman in the movie, but like his job like barely matters. And I think that's kind of the point. He's married, he has a wife, so he's like pretty settled. They kind of make him a little bit kind of like dorky. They give him these kind of little like dad jokes and expressions he loves saying. Like he's just like a very very ordinary guy who's got this hint of quirkiness to him.
Yeah,
So it just makes
exactly.
him the perfect actor to play him.
And did you know that Robin Williams was originally considered for the role?
I have read that before.
Which is because, Peter Weir, the director, he worked with Williams on Dead Poets Society. And that's another case,
Oh
another movie
yeah.
where you take an actor who's primarily known for his
Yeah.
energy and you boil it down and you can get a great dramatic performance out of it. I don't think I could see Robin Williams doing. He would do a great job, but I just feel like it would be a little bit miscast. It
Yeah.
would be definitely a miscast. Like I could picture him. I could picture him going like, "Oh, it's a beautiful day. Good morning.
Yeah.
And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night." Oh yes. That's sort of my impression. There we go.
Yeah, I think the role has become so synonymous with him at this point. It's hard to see anybody else in it. Like to me, it's just like such an important part of his career that kind of
Yeah.
subsequently led to him pursuing other kinds of movies. That like I really think such a testament to his talent at this point.
With Peter Weir, I don't know if you're familiar with his filmography. He is probably one of the most underrated directors out there, and find The Truman Show an inspiration for me because it's probably one of my favorite directed movies. We'll go through it as we break down the movie, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of subtlety and a lot of nuance in this film that inspires me. Like it's almost crazy. And even just rewatching it recently for this podcast, I'll mention it when we get to it, but there are things that I did not pick up on out of the numerous times I've watched this movie. It's like
Yeah,
I pick up little things every time. I
yeah,
mean, are you aware of Peter Weir, like his films?
yeah. I mean, I've seen Dead Poets. I briefly looked at his IMDb yesterday as well. I'm sure I've seen other movies of his.
Witness with Harrison Ford.
Right? Yeah.
That's a
Um,
great one. His most underrated movie, and I'm not kidding, you should watch this immediately. Fearless, 1993.
Fearless. Oh, okay. Oh, so before this
Jeff,
movie. Yeah.
read the movie right before the Truman Show. Jeff Bridges and Rosie Perez.
Oh, cool.
It's a very profound film on how to deal with grief, and
Hmm.
my God, it leads to such an impactful conclusion. It's sickeningly underrated, and I highly recommend everybody to watch that.
Okay, cool.
So it takes place in the fictional town of Sea Haven, and it was shot on Seaside, Florida. Shot in Seaside, Florida.
Okay, cool.
And I'm kind of happy that they went with an authentic, like an actual town, because I think the studio Paramount was saying to Weir, we have all these backlots. Why don't we just build some sets? And he kind of said, no, no, no. We want to try to find a place where the audience can feel like that's a place I'd rather be. And where else can we look other than Florida? Sea Haven is just populated by just the sort of perfect life that we all kind of imagine ourselves being into. And I think that's sort of a reason why, in the context of the movie, why everybody would tune in to watch The Truman Show, is because he's living sort of that fantasy world of having everything happy and worry free, and everybody's friendly, and everything's always so beautiful. There's less consequences there.
Yeah, I was reading on IMDb yesterday that there was rumors, like in the kind of initial stages of planning the script, that they were planning on it being like a sort of big city that Truman lived in, like a kind of like New York sort of prototype. And I
Yep.
honestly really love that they kept it as this small town because I feel like someone Truman's age, who's about 30, is kind of between two things. You know, maybe he's ended one chapter of his life and he's maybe chasing another. But the way that Truman Show contextualizes his life now is like this life you're living is gonna be, you know, it. Like
Yeah.
this is you forever. obviously that's a little bit of his character arc in the movie. He wants to explore more. He wants to see what else is out there. So to put him in a small town, working a desk job made a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, I can relate to Truman in that respect. I feel like I need to travel the world and just sort of get out there, and I sort of have the same excuses that he says in the film, where it's a lot of planning, money, and you can't just get up and go. So
Hmm.
it's a relatable movie for that sense, because I've been to East Coast, West Coast in Canada because I got family on both ends, but like I haven't even been to. Speaking of Florida, haven't been there yet. I'd love to see Disney World and take a pit stop in New York sometime and see the square. Just little things like that.
Yeah.
Like I feel like nicely bubbled in Canada, but I think it's time that probably should branch out later on in life, take a few flying trips.
Yeah, I think this last year has sparked that in a lot of us.
Oh Jesus, yeah.
Yeah.
Or unless your whole life is like on a television show, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
But when you're saying about early drafts that it took place in a larger city, yeah, the screenwriter Andrew Niccol, who came off of doing Gattaca, he wrote Gattaca,
Right.
a cool concept, soft sci-fi kind of story. He had it be set in sort of a simulation of New York, and it was a lot more science fiction thrillery in the script. But Peter Weir kind of wanted to scale that back a bit and make the show like comforting to watch. Hence, there's a lot of classical music. It just feels like a very comfy show to watch. And this is something I guess we'll get into right before we break down the film. But like, let's get into kind of like this political debate on the show. If this was real, would you watch it? Are you watch Truman or free Truman?
Um, yeah, I think I am free Truman. It doesn't seem like something that I would personally watch, which I think is kind of the genius commentary of the movie. I think that this is a 90s movie, and I think it only could have been made in the 90s, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
the the market is so saturated with television nowadays that I can't see a show about one guy being like the must-see TV event. Like there's just so much going on in the world like now. But if you frame it in the context of like, 90s and people can only watch TV on their TV, it would
yeah.
probably be a pretty popular show, or at least the kind of have a fringe popularity.
And it
Um,
was sort of released in the perfect time because
yeah.
around that time in the 90s, really the only reality show that was popular at the time was The Real World.
Right.
But then Peter Weir sort of thinks, or he thought of at the time, this is sort of a dangerous movie to make because I can see this being a reality. And then later on, he says, well, there you go. This movie came true because reality shows sort of became so popular back then
Yeah.
that it sort of just took off and it sort of predicted the future, really. Our sort of obsession with watching just reality shows in general. Like, did you watch any reality shows growing up?
Not a lot, and that's why I say I would probably be on Team Free Truman. It just isn't something that I would watch. I never really got caught up in the reality TV kind of wave. I feel like I might have, in my time, followed the occasional like talent based show. Like I would follow like American Idol or America's Got Talent or whatever. But like pure just observing people through the fish tank was never really my thing. I often kind of loved escapism in television, so I liked kind of more kind of bizarre, wackier stuff. So
Yeah.
I just never really, it never really was my thing, no.
Yeah, I occasionally watch like the odd reality show. Like, I mean, when I was going through like a Jackass phase when I was a teenager, I'd watch like Viva La Bam or Kenny vs. Spenny, where it's like, even if I didn't care what was scripted or not, it was sort of just amusing to watch their personalities on screen. But then after a while, I hated watching these shows, trying to figure out if it was like what parts were scripted and what parts were genuine moments.
Yeah, yeah.
So I get that there's a place for them. I don't mind people watching them. It's just I find when they try to blur the line between movie and documentary to be not really my shtick.
Yeah.
I am definitely team Free Truman. However, if say this show was on and I was hearing through people that actually watch it religiously, or if it was on the news, if I heard that like Truman Burbank is slowly discovering his true world, like
Yeah.
basically the events, the first part of the movie, I would kind of be watching it, and then by the time when you figure out Truman is gone, I would have been glued to the
Yeah.
TV. I would have skipped work and I would have watched that, hoping that he would get out.
For sure. And that's kind of an interesting metaphor within the film itself, I think, that everything is just so normal for him for so long, and then one very pivotal day in his life, everything changes.
Basically, Kristoff should have took that stage light that fell from the sky at the beginning. He
Yeah.
should Kristoff should have just looked at that as an omen for the week to come.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
What was your favorite moment from the Truman Show?
Oh gosh, there's a lot, but I really like I think Marlon's kind of speech to Truman, where he's talking about how he's not in on it because there's no it. It's this really emotional, friendly heart to heart between two kind of lifelong best friends, and then the reveal is he's actually being fed lines by the creator of the show. That's like an it's such a brilliant scene because it's like it's so honest and it's so raw, and it's like a conversation that each of us have probably had at some point in our lives, and then to realize it's just manufactured is like chilling. It doesn't even give you that reveal from the outset, which is what's so great about the scene. The guy's just talking, 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 and then you realize there's a voice in his head, and it's like it changes everything.
Yeah, because like the actor, like Noah Emmerich. Okay, so this is kind of a mouthful. It's Noah Emmerich playing the actor Louis Coltrane, playing the character Marlon.
Yeah.
That scene, I always looked at it as, and this kind of goes into like the fun fact of how Noah Emmerich, he was basically writing a character breakdown on what Lewis would be like playing Marlon in the show, and it was essentially he's longtime friends with Truman. There's even there's that line in your scene where he was saying he was like sick for about a month. He was absent from the show.
Mm-hmm.
And they wrote in things where he was struggling with addiction problems like drugs. Like, how does he go through this show and try to maintain what is sort of a fake friendship?
Yeah.
And he struggled with it. You can even see it when he's being fed that line, and the last thing I'd ever do is lie to you. You can see it in his face. He's just hesitant to say it.
For sure. It's a brilliantly nuanced performance from all the supporting cast in his life. It's really, really cool. Yeah.
Even Laura Linney, when she played Hannah Gill, who plays Meryl. Oh, yeah, and please correct me if I'm going to get Meryl and Marlon mixed up a lot. It's going to happen because they sound very similar. But
yeah.
She wrote her character treatment or her character breakdown as she basically gets a bump in her paycheck if she advertises something in the show. So she's like going to town on it all the time, just smiling in the camera going, why don't you try this product? Try that,
Yeah.
And I think even there's like something in her contract that she wrote where anytime she sleeps with Truman, she gets like $10,000.
Yeah.
Which is a thing that I read up on, that there's a professor that uses this as like this film as a thesis where they try to examine on whether or not Meryl's character is prostituting herself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of layers the more you pick up on. And stuff like that as a kid totally flew over my head.
Yeah.
And
there's that moment where Kristoff talks about how it's his ambition to have the first ever on-air conception. And it's
yeah. And I want to bring up later on, please remind me if I forget, but it's during the True Talk scene. I want to talk about a certain deleted scene from this movie that was, I have to bring this up, but
okay, cool.
I'll wait till later on. My favorite moment is probably the whole 10 minutes, and I actually clocked it. I want to see how long this was. The entire 10 minutes of Truman meeting Laura Garland, but it's actually Sylvia Garland, played by Natasha McElhone, because like it did like a little flashback thing within the show to see how like he locks eyes with this girl on his campus when he's graduating, and it's the first time in the show, within the context of the show, that there's actually like a genuine human connection. And the fact that it's just 10 minutes long and they have this nice little chemistry together, their dynamic is nice, and the music is really relaxing. It's like one of the only tracks in the soundtrack that isn't performed by Barkhard Delwitz or Philip Glass. They both did a collaboration in this. That's the only track that's actually just traditional classic music.
Right. Yeah, the movie has a very interesting pace to it, and I think the utilization of that flashback helps contextualize everything. And it's like
Yeah.
at the exact right time to kind of hook us in and intrigue us and figure how this piece of the puzzle is going to fit in and stuff. It's really, really cool.
All right, so before we get into this show, let's do a little bit of pop quiz. Hot shot.
Awesome.
All right, how about you take it away? I think I took it away last week, so.
Sounds good. So at one point in the film, Christoph is asked how many cameras are used in Truman's Show. What is the what is the figure what is the figure he gives of the amount of cameras needed to give the Truman Show to life?
That's what I wrote down for you, so I'm happy I wrote down extra ones. He said it's approximately 5,000.
Correct. I knew you knew that one. This one's super easy. I'm sure that you're going to get this one. Which Simpsons alumni appears in this film?
It is Harry Shearer playing Mike Michelson.
Correct.
What a name, too.
Complete the response. Christoph says to Truman, "I know you better than you even know yourself." What does Truman reply?
You've never had a camera in my head.
Correct. What actor in this film would go on to appear with Jim Carrey in the film Man on the Moon?
Oh, I've seen Man on the Moon once. What actor? Oh, is it Paul Giamatti?
Correct.
Holy shit! Okay, that was a wild guess, but I thought because I think this might have been one of Paul Giamatti's first roles, and he was kind of just like a side character. I figured he might break out someday. Why not on Man on the Moon?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Who does he play in that one?
In Man on the Moon, he plays he plays a comedian by the name of Bob Zamuda, who sort of worked with Andy Kaufman.
Okay.
I've got a similar sort of question, but this one might be a bit tricky.
Okay.
I'm not going to give you the title, but can you tell me the actor in this film who plays Jim Carrey's boss in a future film?
He plays Jim Carrey's boss in a future film. I'm not sure, actually.
The answer is Philip Baker Hall, who would star with Jim Carrey and Bruce Almighty.
So who does he play in Truman Show?
He's one of the producers in the Truman Show. He's the guy who's kind of arguing with Christoph a little bit in the control room.
Oh, is he the one that's like, you can't let him die in front of a live audience?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, he's in, I know that actor. He's in Boogie Nights. Yeah, he's in a couple of things, actually, yeah. He always plays, that boss type of character.
Yeah. He plays the head of the station in Bruce Almighty, who's... Yeah.
Ah, okay.
And what's kind of interesting is in the Truman Show, neither of these actors have screen time with Jim Carrey, just because they're both in the control room.
Yeah.
What is the last line in this film, and do you know who speaks it?
Okay, well, it was one of the parking garage security guards. One of them was saying, all right, what else is on TV? Where's the TV guide?
Yeah.
I think that's literally the last line. I don't know who it was. It was just that's the last moment of the film.
Yeah. Where's the TV guide was the last line spoken by the attendant there. He is actually an actor named Joel McKinnon Miller, who people might recognize nowadays from his role on Brooklyn Nine-Nine as Scully.
Oh, okay. I've seen a couple episodes.
Yeah.
I knew he's one of those actors where you go, oh, it's that person.
Pretty much. Yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of his more regular series roles, so it was funny to me upon our recent rewatch realizing that was him.
Yeah. All right, my questions. True or false? Jim Carrey and Ed Harris met for the very first time on the last day of shooting.
True.
False.
Oh.
Jim Carrey and Ed Harris did not meet at all throughout the filming of The Truman Show. They met probably at the premiere night.
Oh, okay. I'd heard that I heard that they didn't really interact during the film, but I thought maybe there was a thing that they met on the last day or something. Cool.
And did you know that the role of Christoph was supposed to be Dennis Hopper?
I have heard that.
He was on set for a day or something like that, and there was creative differences, and he either walked off or he was let go, and they had to get an actor right away. Literally, the day that they were shooting, they happened to have Ed Harris available, and they just quickly explained everything about his character, and they're like, you fill in the gaps. I think there was one point where Ed Harris was trying to pitch the idea of having Christoph have a hunchback, and Peter Weir was like, that's a good idea, but we probably won't go with that.
Okay.
And side note, just because I'm a trivia guy, it's ironic that Dennis Hopper went on to be in Ed TV, and he played Matt McConaughey's dad, and that's ironic because Ed TV is the movie that draws comparisons to the Truman Show.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's a hit or miss comedy, but the only difference is Matt McConaughey is aware that he's being filmed.
Yeah. I have seen it once, but I don't have the same.
Exactly. All right, next question. What was red on the pin attached to Sylvia's shirt?
What was red on the pin attached to Sylvia's? Is it Free Truman or something like that?
Nope.
Oh.
How is it going to end?
Oh, yeah, okay. I can picture the pin now.
Yeah. All right, next one. What were the 3 occurrences that Truman noticed in a loop when he was looking through the rearview mirror?
The last one is the yellow beetle. Do I have to say them in order?
Yep.
Oh. Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah. If you can.
I definitely remember the beetle, and I can picture this sequence, but I'm probably not going to get the other 2 correct. Woman walking a dog, I want to say. Something to do with a dog.
Is that all you got?
Yeah, that's all I got.
It was lady on a bike, man with flowers, and the dented Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah.
But at least you got that beetle, that dented beetle. Yes!
Yeah.
When greeted by Truman with a good morning, what does he follow up with in case he doesn't see you?
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Yeah, there you go. Whatever. That's an easy one, but it's fine. I'll accept it.
Yeah.
All right, let's break into this film, shall we?
Yes, we shall.
So we start off with, I guess, a rare interview with Christoph, just explaining the show on what it is, about how he loves how real Truman is, even though everything around him is basically sort of controlled and it's fake to a certain extent. He just finds Truman's believability the center point of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we get, like, Truman's talking to himself in the mirror, and he's, it's one of those moments where you just feel like, wow, if you were in this situation, like, you can't even have any privacy ever.
Mm-hmm.
Just those, I just love that, and it warms us up to what it is right away without giving it itself away right at the start. You're sort of like give a little brief introduction, almost like a documentary. You know how in documentaries would briefly give like a little sting at the beginning before showing the title about what you're about to watch.
Yeah.
And then it leads into, like, the backstory, and then we'll get to the, whatever it is, the inciting incident or something like that. It's basically structured that exact same way, which I find really nice to warm up the audience.
For sure. The way we learn things at the same pace as the title character is really, really interesting in this film.
Yeah, and that's sort of the first, like, hour, I would say, until it sort of shift focuses, and the focus kind of shifts, and we watch the show from, like, the control room.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're sort of introduced to Truman Burbank again, ordinary man, very uplifted, sort of lives the life, sort of just going through the motions, essentially. It's sort of like same day, same shit idea, but, like, he's perfectly happy with it.
Yeah.
Until he starts to pick up little things, like I mentioned before, like the stage light falling from the sky. It was like a great little, like, and what's funny is that it's a funny movie, but, like, you're mostly laughing at the cleverness behind it. Like, you're not laughing at yucks, you're not laughing at anything. It's just you sort of, like, chuckle, go, haha, that is so clever.
Yeah, for sure. You're kind of caught off guard by almost the familiarity of it, or just like how kind of funnily kind of out of place something might be. And when it is for sure it's a clever laugh. It's like you're warming yourself up for it. It's very interesting though.
I love how they clear it up in the radio talk show. Says, like, well, there was a space shuttle flying over Sea Haven that broke apart, and a lot of parts came into the
Yeah, yeah,
atmosphere. Luckily, no one was hurt. It's like everybody's always on. I could just picture like the wheels spinning in the control room. Christoph's like, "All right, just come up with an idea. Just it was just
yeah,
space shuttle debris. Just quickly wrap that up." It's like
yeah.
there's so much going into the production of the show, which is great.
There's a fair amount of people in television who make a very legitimate living just being fixers, kind of, replacing cast or crew or doctoring
Mhm.
scripts or producers who come on board when things just aren't quite working and have to weigh in and stuff like that. And the way that that's like kind of integrated into our story quite literally through the control room is fascinating and brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And then he's walking to work, and I love that little scene. And it took me a long time to pick up on it about just the whole how this show is trying to shove as much advertisement in the
Oh
audience's
yeah.
face. Is that the twins show up on the street and they kind of push Truman up against the wall to advertise, like I think it's like a chicken company,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Kaiser Chicken or something like that. And then
Yeah.
Truman's like, "Oh, okay, why are you pushing me up against here?" And the camera kind of pushes in a bit to get that shot. Yeah, it took me a while to pick up on that.
Yeah, for sure. The image is, so important on television, and getting the right image in television and film is like such a big part of it that it's kind of cool how there's these own little kind of in-universe setups where they're trying to get the shot and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine them just, I mean, you can even see it in one point in the control room. There's like a guy on an exercise wheel. Like it just seems like this crew is working around the clock.
Yeah.
Like they probably get like overtime shift, like, or they shuffle between other crew members, but like there's so much going on.
Yeah.
And then Truman, we're sort of learning little things like, he's sort of wanting to go to Fiji. He's sort of trying to track down a girl named Sylvia, or her name is Lauren.
Hmm.
And everyone's always just trying to shove it in his face, like, look how great Sea Haven is. Isn't it so great? And Christoph always writes these little things throughout the show to sort of prey on his fear of the water.
It's a cool metaphor for how media might influence somebody impressionable to begin with. Just how stories and things that we watch influence our lives. It's quite literally affecting everything in Truman's life. Like, like they're literally, I don't know if there's a better word for it, but they're quite literally gaslighting him into believing certain things.
Yeah, gaslighting is a strong word, and it's an accurate word, really. But just how they come up with these concepts, how to scare him to just stay into Sea Haven, like, make him go to this harbor island, but he can't even step on the dock without getting, like, triggered from. We'll get to the scene later, but, like, there was a tragic thing that happened in his past,
For
reason
sure.
why he cannot go to the water. And then he's hanging out with Marlon on the bridge. I think it's the same bridge that we see later on in your favorite, where it's incomplete,
Hmm.
and that's kind of like symbolic towards like your life is like a road, but it's like he's going nowhere, kind
Yeah.
of thing. Like it's and that's their hangout spot. He's talking about going to Fiji, and it's very, like you said, nuanced with just like his performance. Like you're my friend, Truman. Why'd you want to go? You have a great job. I'd kill to have your job.
Yeah.
And I always laugh at like his advertisement. He drinks the beer and says, "That's a
Beer.
beer."
Yeah,
It
that's right.
reminds me of the Wayne's World bit where he's like, "Contract or not, I bow to no sponsor," and he like drinks the Pepsi and smiles
Yeah.
in the camera. um, and then we're followed up by a really strong scene where Truman's on the beach remembering what happened to his dad. His dad and him, I think he was around maybe 8 years old, 10 years old,
Hmm.
and he's sailing out with his dad, and his dad was saying, "Looks like the weather's getting a little bad. We should probably go back." And Truman's persistent. We should. No, Dad, let's stay out here and all that. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
They get caught in a storm, and tragically they kill off. I have to say they kill off Kurt, his dad, and since then Truman has just been traumatized of the water. The score really is like a character in this movie. It just the kind of orchestra and piano work that's in the score by Burkhard Delwitz and Philip Glass it's memorable. Like I
Yeah.
listen to the soundtrack just on my own sometimes, and I love just thinking of like the moment that the soundtrack was playing in the movie, but also trying to like I'm walking around at night or walking around during the day, I try to like see if does this match? What's going on right now? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up. I'll have to look up more of his work, but more of their work rather. But when I was watching it last night, the music really underscores this film beautifully. Like
yeah,
it's just it hits at the right moments, and yeah, like it's like a 90s movie that doesn't have like any pop music or any music that's dated whatsoever. It's just like
none.
it's just
No.
like purely got this kind of classical feel to it, and it's incredible.
What would be your favorite? And you don't have to know the name. I don't expect you to know that.
Yeah.
But like, what scene in the movie do you think is your favorite of just wanting to listen to just the score?
It would probably be that very last scene where he's just walking along the edges of his world, touching the walls,
Yeah. Oh,
walking up the stairs, and then he starts to speak to Kristoff. Yeah,
yeah. Oh,
it's incredible.
that's the part as a kid that got to me emotionally because it was heightened with that score. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's dramatic. It's really well done. Now I want to talk to you about this next scene here, and I ponder over it. It's not a mistake. It's sort of just like I'm trying to understand it. Like Truman getting hit by a shower of rain that's sort of following him at first, and then
Yeah.
eventually the downpour starts. If they're really trying to like, I'm trying to put my mindset into Truman. Like, would he think rain acts like this because he hasn't lived in the real world yet? Like the
Oh
fact that
yeah.
it's following him, would he pick up that this is strange, or is this a malfunction as far as the crew is doing, or is this them trying to? I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't get. What is your interpretation on this scene, actually?
I always saw that as the crew trying to kick him into gear to doing something else because he'd just been too stagnant for so long.
But would they risk having him be more suspicious?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's where I kind of have struggled to wrap my head around it too, because I'd never thought about that. Maybe that is how Rain behaves in his world. I mean, surely over 30 plus years, he's probably had lots of lonely, contemplative moments like that where they've had to get the plot in motion again.
Well, yeah. There's like Christoph said, there was a lot of close calls that he sort of just thinks, oh, that was weird. Why was
Yeah.
this guy just yelling, "It's television" or "You're on TV"? All the stuff that they try to
Yeah.
get him away from.
Yeah. But yeah, it goes back to what Korstoff says about accepting the reality with which you're presented, I guess.
You know what? Touche. I guess I just never really talked to anybody about that moment, but I always question like why did that happen? But you know what? Trying to like, get him out of there because the audience is probably getting bored and they don't want to
Yeah.
sit on this moment too much, that makes sense. That's a good point actually. Maybe I'll take that.
I think it's a little bit for our audience, to just be sort of like, huh, this isn't this funny? These kind of TV like mechanics exist in this guy's world. Like we can just make it rain on him.
And then he's trying to convince later on he's coming in soaking wet and he's trying to convince Meryl, we just need to like go somewhere to Fiji, and she's trying to convince him to stay. Like, instead of having an actual adventure, let's try for a baby. That'll be an actual,
Yeah.
adventure, so that really doesn't really go anywhere. And then, I just start loving, I loved it. I love slowly you start to see like people in the real world watching the show. The two security guards that we touched upon, how they're just like making little observations on how it's like you never see any crew members. It's kind of cool, like, and then
Yeah.
they named a bar off of the Truman Show, and they just show it all the time. And
Yeah.
there's that one waitress that like she seems like she's obsessed with the show, and there's that other younger girl that's like asking questions like what about the show, and she like knows it like verbatim. Like there's a lot of fans, there's a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
newbies, I would say. Like it's very subtle.
Tons of kind of studio movies like this, especially around this time, maybe in the 90s. They always have like second unit footage where they're just kind of cutting to reaction shots of like random people or like whatever, just to make the world feel a little bigger. But here it's like absolutely earned because it's just like they're watching the guy. They're watching the same thing we are. So it's really, really cool how they do that.
Like at first you'd be like, what was that about? Then you go, oh, and you kind of go, that's clever.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then Truman, I mean, you start to see it very subtly into Jim Carrey's performance, like when he's grabbing the paper from the guy, and then he goes, I might as well grab the fashion model magazine. Then every time he goes, like, anything else today, Truman? He always says like some expression. That's the whole bottle of wax, or that's the
Yeah.
whole kit and caboodle. And it just seems kind of like awkward. Like how many expressions can you say every day before it gets tired?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then he's approached by, well, he's not approached, but he walks by who he thinks at first is a homeless man, but he turns back around and is like, Dad, is that you? Two extras in the street just like grab his dad and force him onto a bus, and he's just like running after the bus like, what the hell is this, what's going on, stop. Yeah, like I love every time they touch their ear, that's, they know that they're like, they're panicking, they're scrambling, they're getting notes from like the headquarters, the control room, like to do something. Yeah. So I want to talk to you about the cinematography in this movie, on how it totally is believable in this world where there's a lot of vignette around the frames, and it feels like a lot of it's almost like it to avoid it's to a certain angle where it's clearly hidden camera. It's almost like a voyeur shot.
Yeah, totally.
And it's hidden everywhere. Sometimes it's just real movie, which is fine. That's why the movie kind of, when you suspend your disbelief, you don't really think like, okay, where is that camera at? Or how are they picking up this shot? Like when you're kind of in the movie, you don't really think about that kind of stuff. You're just watching the show. But then there's always this reminder of like these kind of weird shots where it looks like it's in their button on their shirt, or it's from like a distance and you're seeing like the vignette around the frame, and it's like from a fisheye kind of view.
Yeah.
It's
his wedding ring has a camera in it. Like he's got a bunch in his house.
Because that scene with his mom was when I really picked up on it, where his shot, it's like a shot reverse shot, and her shot is perfectly normal, but like it feels like it's literally like probably the camera's outside or on the window somewhere. Like it feels organic, really.
Right. Yeah.
It's attached to some object in the room.
You know what's interesting about that is it would have been such an easy choice to just have Truman discover a camera and just like have him start questioning stuff. But the way that this movie's structured, and he just starts questioning the reality as opposed to the process, I suppose, is so much more of an interesting choice to me.
Yeah, because Truman picks up that the world is revolved around him somehow, but it is until the very end where he realizes through Christoph confessing it to him that it's a show. Then he sort of, oh, okay, now I get the context of this whole thing. Yeah. Yeah, when he tries to convince his mom that I saw Dad, and she's saying, "Oh, don't worry, Truman, I see Dad all the time," that's kind of kicks off his whole like suspicion, like what's going on here, there's something up. And then later on, he's in the basement and he's looking through like old pictures of his dad, and then Meryl comes down and kind of just like distracts him, and I love it's like, you should probably throw away that old motor. She shares in the camera. Get one of those new elk rotaries. And the camera pushes in, like she just does it anytime she can.
That's a really interesting running thread through this movie. The advertisements within the film, I think that was a brilliant kind of B plot to introduce.
Well, you think about it, like the amount of like technology, and like, oh my god, it's almost like too futuristic. Like they can make the sun go up and down. They like the amount, like basically I think they said it as like the show, as Truman grew up, the show also grew up with him essentially, and they had to build more sets, and they had to more ad revenue. It makes sense. It's fantasy. It's unbelievable, but it's also kind of believable in the same way. That's where I'm saying like this movie is like soft sci-fi almost.
Yeah, totally. The way that they kind of have to simulate whatever's next, whatever he's going to interact with next. It's like part of the world doesn't even exist till Truman shows up. You see kind of guys getting ready, or guys trying, or like the crew kind of scrambling to make amends based on whatever his impulses are. It's insane.
Yeah, you just mentioned something that we're gonna get to later on, but it's one of those parts that I just noticed for the first time rewatching it, and it's pretty crazy, the subtle direction in this. But we'll get to it. I'll remember to say this. But
cool.
But yeah, when he was looking through old things, he has this red shirt, and it flashes back to again my favorite scene when he is graduating college and he sees in the distance Lauren, but it's actually Sylvia. I love how everybody's just trying to distract him, whether it's, Marlon playing the trumpet, and then I guess that's how he meets Meryl when she trips over him. Later on, they're at the dance, and then, like, they're eyeballing each other, and then, like, a couple of extras just escort Sylvia off the set.
Yeah.
And then, there's even little things that happen where, like, say there's the hidden cameras there, like, they got the shot, they got the perspective, but they just need, like, someone to, like, move the object. In that scene where he's studying, someone just, like, moves the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, like those are really good, nice touches too. Then eventually he meets Sylvia and or Lauren, I guess. It's kind of confusing, but she is just an extra, and they hit it off really nicely. She says, I shouldn't be talking to you. When he asks her out, she says, let's do this now. Let's go out now. And I love when she's sort of looking around for cameras, and as they're leaving, like she like runs around the corner with him, and then they run to the beach. They're just trying to get out of the vicinity of these hidden cameras, and yet Truman has no idea what's going on. But they
Yeah.
get to the beach. They share that stolen kiss, and then Laura's supposed dad comes to stop everything. That's when Sylvia tries to really tell Truman what's going on, and Truman has no idea what the hell she's talking about like how everybody's pretending, and the whole it's fake. Everything is fake. You're on a show, and the dad's saying she's a schizophrenia. Don't believe her. This is where she takes all of her boyfriends. Like it just creates that sort of like he'll like because the actor was kind of believable, like
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you don't really know her, and also what she's saying is probably crazy to his point of view, so it makes sense. But he doesn't want to give up to try to find her after she's taken away, and I guess they moved to Fiji, and that's why he's wanting to go there. But it's okay because Sylvia, as we are shown, is kind of, I guess, hate watching the show because like she, I guess, became a protester and like someone who's completely avid on trying to get this show canceled and to free
Yeah.
Truman.
Yeah.
And she finds it, and she does find it sweet. Her he's really wanting to find her, and instead
Yeah.
he just settles down. He settles down with Meryl instead and gets married and all that. So I mean, what can you do? What can you do really when you're in Truman's position? What can you do really?
Yeah, as young people who go through heartbreak or whatever, we're always fed the narrative that everything happens for a reason. But in this one, it's like that premise is totally warped. Like his destiny with this one person was premeditated, and that's like absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then we're followed up with a scene where he's driving to work and the radio starts to glitch, and he picks up, I guess, a production coordinator giving, direction to everybody, like extra standby. He's now turning on this road, and Truman's like, what the hell is going on? And then they try to like come up with an excuse like, oh, sorry about that, folks. We just picked up some
Yeah.
police report or something like that. And like Truman, this is the point where Truman really suspects something is up and I fucking love this scene where he is like stepping out of his comfort zone and his normal life routine, and he's noticing that like everybody is not reacting to his spontaneous actions, whether he's going through the revolving doors and going into a building that he has no business of being into. And then that's where he discovers like when he's trying to go into the elevator, he's looking at the backdrop, and you can see a craft table in the back and
I
they're
love that.
trying to like,
That's one of my very favorite shots.
yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Everything is always in this nice, sequence of events. Like when he got kicked out of that building, it just cuts to that wide shot, and it's just weird to see all these extras just walking. It's like they're simulated almost.
For sure.
Like he's the one panicking, but like everybody's just like going about their day. It's interesting. It's so interesting to see him sort of fall off track of his life.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then he goes to Marlin, who's like a vending machine guy, and he's like explaining like so many weird things have been happening. Like, please hang out with me. Like, it's again just another one of those scenes where Marlin convinces him it's all in your head. I love this scene here where I guess like the actresses that the actress that played Truman's mother and Meryl are being told to just really go at it and try to just convince Truman to stay, show him some old family photos, reminiscent, and he's sort of like distracted and all that stuff. And like the Mount Rushmore bit is great.
Yeah, that was
Where
really
it's like,
funny.
look, Truman, you've been outside of Sea Haven. We were at Mount Rushmore, and he takes a closer look. It looks really small, doesn't it? And she just like quickly turns the page. Ah, it's okay. It looks small anyways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, and then when he's left alone, it took me a while to pick up on this, but like I think the first time I saw this, I was like, what was he so caught off by? But in the wedding photo, Meryl's crossing her fingers, and he's all like, what? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I love that moment. And okay, here's the first thing that I discovered. I want to know if you knew this too. The first thing I discovered upon rewatching this on the kitchen table in this next scene, right before Meryl goes in for the supposed surgery, there's a big bottle of vitamin D on the table, and that's indicating that like they're not exposed to the real sun, so they obviously need their vitamins.
Oh, that's smart. That's clever. I don't think I noticed that.
Yeah, when Truman was kind of playing around with that globe radio thing, just a huge bottle of vitamin D right there, and I'm thinking, oh my god, that makes sense. They're in a giant dome. They're not near the real sun. Oh my
Yeah.
god, Peter Weir, how like your set designer. Props to them. Props to them.
That's really good. The hospital scene is a really funny sequence. Just when everyone's struggling to keep up with the improvisation.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. As an actor, do you think she did a good job at like talking her way out of that, trying to find an excuse on why she's going into work about saying like that elevator thing, and like, do you think that was believable?
Yeah, I liked that a lot. Yeah, I think that that was well done, and I think that she did the best that she could have under the circumstances. I think like if you frame it in a way that like the producers are scrambling to come up with some sort of band-aid solution to get her away for a little while, I think that scene takes on a whole new layer and it's really good. But yeah, her like performance within the performance is really really good.
Yeah.
And I like how it's kind of mirrored just a couple moments later when that like nurse attendant type person who's basically a featured extra is tasked with keeping him away from the surgery room.
Yeah.
You can tell that that actress within the story is really uncomfortable having to do this much improv with the lead actor sort of. I
Yeah,
love
like
that
she
moment.
she has like a line like, "Oh, you're going to Fiji. You want me to
Yeah.
pass that message down to her?" Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And the doctors who are actors clearly not knowing what the hell they're talking about and just kind of parroting things you might hear on any medical show was very very funny.
well,
Yeah.
they accidentally drop something, and then like they scare the shit out of the person that's
The,
supposed to be the patient because he's like,
yeah.
"I'm gonna make an incision in the knee," and then like the patient
Yeah.
pops up and is startled, and it's just like this awkward thing. But then eventually they get Truman out of the way, and then
Yeah.
all right, this next scene is the part that I cannot believe it took me years to pick up on. And again, I want to know if you knew this. So when he's at the travel agent office, I did not know that that extra that came in was still wearing a tissue paper around her collar because she was quickly getting her makeup done. Because she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I kept you waiting." She comes in and then she kind of takes off the napkin a couple seconds later. Oh my
Yeah.
god, subtle, so subtle.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. I have spotted that from time to time. The production design in that scene is so funny because it's just all these posters talking about how unsafe it is to travel, and it's like why would this agency ever exist?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
why would you have a picture of a plane getting struck by lightning saying this could happen to you?
yeah, yeah. It's like they needed to exist just to kind of put that in Truman's head a little bit more, but it's like so
Yeah.
funny that they just went through all the trouble of building this fake travel agency just to have the one scene where the woman tells him that he can't fly anywhere. Sort of, it's like,
Well,
yeah,
I looked up to see
yeah,
if I was just kind of reading into it too much about the napkin and all that, but I was right. Like it was
yeah,
sort of a rushed thing where just grab some random extra, slap on some makeup, and just get her in there because it felt like that place had been not used. It was
yeah, yeah,
just, so yeah, it's great. So when that didn't turn out, he decides I'm going to charter a bus and get on, make my way to. I think it's Chicago, but he just want. It doesn't matter if it's Fiji or Chicago. He just wants to get the hell out of Sea Haven.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love how it's like every extra is so stiff on that bus, and they're so robotic.
yeah,
And like when the bus driver purposely tries to like, I don't know what he does really. He just makes the bus seem like it can't go anywhere. They get
yeah,
everybody off, and everybody just has like no reaction. They just get off.
yeah,
And it's the bus driver, and it's something that I want to talk about a little bit later with the character of Marlon, where it feels like some extras do feel bad for Truman.
yeah,
That they have to keep him here and control him. It's like they feel bad, but it's their job. It's organic, but it's also realistic because like not everybody likes their jobs, and here it feels natural and believable.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a brilliant point.
And then we're followed up by that part that I quizzed you, where he's sitting in the car. He's like, "I'm gonna predict that in a moment. A lady on a bike, a man with flowers, and the Titan Beetle." There we go.
Yeah,
And this is a scene where it starts to feel like Jim Carrey is starting to act like Jim Carrey because he's just kind of acting like crazy and like
yeah, yeah,
spontaneous and all that.
yeah,
Oh my god, he just takes Meryl for this like insane spontaneous ride in the car.
yeah.
And like Yeah, like it goes all over the place. Like they just make a traffic jam, and then he's like, you know what, I'm sorry, backs up the car, starts spinning again, then
Yeah.
goes back on the same road. Hey, look, the traffic jam is gone.
Same road, no cars.
It's
It's great.
magic.
Yeah.
And then we get to a part where he is scared of driving over water, so he has Meryl drive for him by closing his eyes, and he puts the pedal to the metal. And geez, they're trying to do everything they can. They just throw fire in the road. They just say like there's a forest fire. They just put a fire in the road, and like there's a plant. Okay, I want to pick up on this scene too. This scene kind of confuses me sometimes. Is it just because the extra accidentally slipped saying his name? Because when they get to like this supposed nuclear power plant and that there's a leak, the officer tells them like you can't move forward, you have to turn your car back around. Truman's like, thank you so much, officer, and he goes, you're welcome, Truman. And there's like a beat where it just dawns on Truman. He's like, how did he know my name?
Yeah.
It didn't show the reaction of the officer. So is that really what it's trying to say in that scene where he accidentally slipped?
Yeah, that's how I read it. That's
Okay.
yeah.
It took me a while. It took me a long time to kind of realize what kind of made Truman kind of startled by that. And then yeah, he escapes. They capture him. They bring him home. And I fucking love this scene here where it's like Truman thinks his marriage is like falling apart, and I feel so bad for I guess Hannah Gill, the actress in this scene in the
Mhm.
context where it's like she's doing what she can to like keep Truman intact, that she has no choice but to just advertise something in her face, this cocoa drink.
Yeah.
And officially, Truman just snaps. Like, what does this have to do with anything?
What the hell are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, like, and then she breaks character when it starts to get kind of confrontational. And then
Yeah.
she supposedly, I guess later on, she's kicked off the set. She wants to be written out of the show.
Yeah. And just the way that's kind of handled in a line when Christoph is doing his interview and he's like, well, Truman's going to get a new love interest. She's going to leave him.
Yeah,
We've seen it happen a lot, kind of probably a lot more since the Truman Show, but characters get written out of TV shows all the time now, usually like primary characters. Sometimes even the lead character of the show has to leave. Sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad reasons. And like
yeah,
the show's just tasked with, filling that hole and just
yeah. It happens a lot. Do you watch the show Lost?
no, I never got into Lost, unfortunately.
That's no, it's okay. Just to touch upon something really quickly, there in season 2, there were literally two main characters introduced in that season, and by the time the season ends, those two have already been killed off out of nowhere, and that was only because the two I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to spoil it, but like the two cast members were arrested for DUI. They
Oh wow.
were just charged with a lot of things that they got kicked off the set randomly, like off the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
And when I knew that notion while I was watching it on air, it felt weird and jarring. Like you introduce these two characters, and all of a sudden they're just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. But in the case for this, I can understand with Meryl because like she says like this is so unprofessional. How can I do this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then we get to your favorite scene. Yeah, again, the actor Lewis Coltrane playing Marlon just
Yeah, I was thinking about it on this most recent watch about how they frame it in such a way that they're in their 30s and they've been friends since he says like the seventh grade or something.
yeah, yeah.
So he would have been like a child actor, and now he's like still stuck in that role, and he's lost such a big part of the control of his life, sort of. Like he's just been locked into this thing for so long, and I think they don't beat you over the head with the premise in that movie. They don't have to, but it's kind of just like an interesting thing to think about what's going on in the background. The fact that these other supporting cast have had to devote so much time of their life to Truman's story is pretty insane.
Yeah, it's just such a fascinating premise the more you think about it. And I think the reason why it clicks with so many people is because just one word, originality.
Yeah, there's a lot of high premise kind of movies in the world. I think it was especially a kind of trend in the 90s. Just that sort of like, what if this happened to you? What if this was your reality? Like, and a lot of those movies ran out of steam. With the Truman Show, I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like they have like a solution for everything. And I feel like the third act is usually when a lot of movies falter, and the third act of the Truman Show is like insanely good. Like if everything that's been set up feels like earned when it's kind of just all unraveling, which is brilliant.
Yeah. And then we're followed by, like, what I said before, like, I love how the two worlds of Truman and the control room decide to crisscross, and we're sort of shifting the focus a bit and watching the Truman Show from the center of Ed Harris's character,
Oh
Christoph,
yeah. Oh
the
yeah.
creator. And he is by far the best actor in this whole movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like I think he plays such a fierce and intense and focused, essentially a struggling artist type so well, and he
Yeah.
was nominated for an Oscar for this movie. Actually, I just find that so funny how he was basically like a quick replacement for this movie, and he ends up just. I can't picture anybody else in this role. I can't even picture Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
It's great, and just seeing him, the way he orchestrates the scene when when Truman is finally reunited with his father. Cut to this camera angle. Cut to that. Fade up the music. Now go to the close up of the reuniting scene.
Yeah.
That's a tearjerker moment, and you can just it's because it is a genuine sad moment. I mean, even to Truman's perspective, it is probably sad. Probably the last remaining glimpse of like any sort of realism within the show, because from that point out, Truman is just having like a massive big plan on how to escape.
Mm-hmm.
But also seeing Christoph just in the look on his face, he's like, "We got that moment. We did it." You know, that is a fucking moment. We are making the world cry. It's so great, and they're cheering like, yeah, like we've all been in those situations. Like I'm sure you have too, where you're on set and like you probably see it in like, all the filmmakers' eyes, like they're caught up, they're transfixed, and then they're like, "Yes, we got it."
Yep. Absolutely.
It's great. It's great. And then we literally hard cut to Sylvia watching the scene, and she just looks like distraught and disturbed by it because she's like, "Fuck this show!" Like literally, fuck this show. Hashtag fuck this show. Hashtag free Truman, which would be like on trending all the time. Truman would have no idea what social media is if it took place today.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like, I guess movie shows in the reality shows in the 80s or 90s, you could have like things where you kind of called in or whatever, but like nowadays it's like a whole movement where they kind of ask the audience to like engage online. There's hashtags, there's always kind of movements, there's always like social media accounts will be very, very careful and kind of like ask people what they thought of such and such. And yeah, it would be interesting to see how Twitter would react to the Truman Show.
Yeah. And then we take a little intermission, I guess, from the programming of the Truman Show, and we have a little sidebar of what Truman's doing, of him just having coffee and eating, and we get to a rare exclusive interview with Christoph on this True Talk show hosted by Harry Shearer playing Mike Michelson, and I love this whole thing because the audience would love to see how does this show function, like just little snippets on the making and like were there any mishaps and what was the backstory really behind this whole thing. And it's such a great scene. Actually, you touched upon it, and how any sort of explanation within the storyline of the Truman Show, there's always something, even if it's a simple answer. And I loved how when Michael Michelson's like, so are you going to explain the 22-year absence of Truman's father? Christoph just goes, amnesia, and he goes, brilliant.
Yeah, I love it. Harry Shearer's voice is funny, and it's a welcome presence in this movie. I know that you and I are both into The Simpsons a lot, and it's funny because it's not quite his like Brockman voice, but you can kind of recognize that voice on the show as like the sort of generic man on TV voice.
Yeah,
that he does.
He did the same thing in the exact year that this movie was released with Roland Emmerich's Godzilla.
Oh right, yeah.
Where he plays like an anchorman, and it's like all I'm hearing is Kent Brockman. Like, this is horrible casting. And I love how that movie also has Nancy Cartwright and Hank Azaria.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this? Like, you just need Dan Castellaneta and Yardley Smith, and then there you go. The family is complete.
That's funny.
But yeah, no, it's the whole True Talk is covered with things where it's like, they're trying to, like we touched upon it, where they're trying to like write things into the show to keep them scared and on Sea Haven. And I love how they say apparently the actor that played Truman's dad hated being written off the show.
Yeah.
And that's why I guess that's why he decides to infiltrate it every so often to try to get closer to Truman.
Yeah. Everything is so thought out in this movie, both in the world that this movie sets up and just like the attention to detail with the producers of the actual film is like insane.
I mean, it'd be hard to make a movie that is about a movie or about a show. It's just like there's like this weird double layer that needs like a lot of focus.
Yeah,
Where not
yeah,
only you're focused on the movie itself, but you're also having to have to write and to have focus within that. You know, it's just it's a lot of concentration. I can't imagine it.
for sure. It's fun for film people like us because whenever they talk shop or like they show some kind of thing you might see on a film set, it's like a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that Leo meme. Oh, it's a craft table. It's a craft table.
Yeah, yeah. And then Christoph and they're taking questions for callers, and then Sylvia gets on the line and she completely tears them apart, saying, "You're a manipulator. You're a liar. This whole show is sick." And obviously, you and I both said like we're definitely on her side on this, but like what I like about how they portray Christoph is he is obviously the antagonist to the film,
Hmm.
but they show a lot of humanity with him on his sort of inner care that he has for Truman, and it's very prevalent in the scene after where he's like touching the big screen watching Truman sleeping. You know, it's like even though what he's doing is inherently wrong, there's like this big ego and like I'm the creator and I'm manipulating a life and not letting him be free. Everything kind of feels like a catch 22, but you can sort of understand his point on trying to give Truman a worry free life and to not bring him into the real world that is filled with, you know, not so good stuff.
Yeah, totally.
There's a lot of depth I find with Christoph. It's really nice. And I think my favorite track of music, when I asked you earlier, would probably have to be this scene where Truman is sleeping, and the track is actually called Truman Sleeps. It's performed by Philip Glass. It's just like that nice tender piano. And funny enough, in the wide shot, when Christoph is touching the big screen when Truman is sleeping, Philip Glass makes a cameo on the left side of the frame playing the piano because I guess they perform the music live. But it's funny how the composer of the movie is within the movie playing the score. It's like,
Totally.
and then okay, here's the thing that I have to talk about this certain deleted scene. Oh my god. So there's a deleted scene at this point where Christoph is having almost like a Skype meeting with the entire cast. Meryl, Truman's dad, Truman's mom, Truman's boss. I said Meryl, right? Yeah, Meryl,
Yeah.
Marlon, and that new girl
Hmm.
is coming to the office who's potentially going to be the new romantic interest. And Christoph is just giving them all like notes and papers on like what's going to come in the weeks ahead of the show. And it's kind of strange. Meryl has a neck brace, like she must have got injured or something, but I kind of went back and rewatched the confrontation scene. I don't think she got injured that much that would have her have a neck brace. I don't know why that was there, but
Yeah.
I yeah. And it was established that she's going to get written off the show, and they're introducing this new Broadway alumni actress playing Vivian, and the actress playing the mom was like, "Oh, I loved you in that performance," and all that. And here's where Peter Weir literally it is proof that he put the story before a potential franchise or potential
Yeah.
opening a whole can of worms. You know what I'm talking about, right? What I'm getting to, where Christoph mentions that there is a new generation of the Truman Show basically coming where they're going to be focusing on another baby. And there's going to be a two-channel programming where you're going to watch the Truman Show and this new human, and it's like, oh my god, this opens up a whole different story. It's interesting and cool to hear it, but like it has no business being in this movie because it's nicely
Right.
simplified. But there's a couple things that I found were interesting in the scene. Like Marlon was asking, so I guess when Truman dies in the show, we just focus on this new character, and Christoph just completely blows him off and says, "Thank you all for your time."
Oh wow. So I'm not actually sure if I've seen these scenes before. They don't even ring a bell for me. I own the DVD, so maybe I can go look. But
It might be, yeah. It's on the Blu-ray, so it
oh,
might.
okay.
I'd be surprised if they don't have that on the DVD.
Yeah. Well, there must be somewhere for me to see them. But yeah,
Probably maybe on YouTube or
I
yeah.
I won't really be
Um,
able to weigh in because I haven't seen them. But they sound fascinating just from like a perspective of what does and doesn't serve the story.
yeah, and the actress playing Vivian was like, well, what happens when Truman and this new baby are on the or are together in the same room? And Christoph just says, well, don't worry, we're gonna cover both shows at the same time. And then she says kind of like a really sleazy line, like, well, let's just make sure it's not twins. and they all kind of laugh. Yeah, the scene kind of really makes like the creator. It just adds a little bit too much. Like it makes the cast look like they're evil when
Right.
really it's just a job. You know, whether they like it or not, we don't need too much with them. It's the Truman Show. It's not the Michael Show. It's not the Cody Show.
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Cool.
yeah. No, it is fascinating actually. And then after Meryl leaves, it seems like Truman is just sort of back to his normal life, going through the motions. And eventually, when the crew members are just sort of like watching Truman later on dismantling his basement, there's only a couple few camera angles that they can get him from while he's just taking a nap downstairs. But Christoph comes in and is like, "This looks kind of suspicious." Kind of
Yeah.
punch in on the audio. Let's hear. Okay, he's breathing. Call him. He's not answering. Okay, now let's go back and look at the playback. And do you think this scene was kind of glossed over? Like, how did Truman really pull this off?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't mind the way that they execute this scene and this kind of series of events just because like it was kind of building towards this. And I like that the people I think it works because the people doing it are so confused too.
Yeah. Well, and they were
But
also maybe a little bit like just. I think it actually happened earlier on where Truman was kind of staring in the mirror, and they thought like, "Oh my God, does he know?" And then really he just did that whole Jim Carrey improvised that where he's taking the bar of soap and he's drawing out the spaceman thing and he's doing
oh
the
yeah.
thing. Yeah, he did a whole bunch of little things like that in the mirror, and Peter Weir like the astronaut one. I guess it's sort of implied that like, oh, okay, he's back to his normal self. We don't need to watch him as much like a hawk because when it cuts to the crew members watching him sleep, they're just like snacking and they're just kind of like, like, oh, the boss is coming, Christoph is coming,
Yeah,
get back to
yeah.
business. So I guess it kind of works. They kind of just like Truman probably just took a huge risk trying to escape out of the basement, and then they catch him escaping and they see his hand move while he's like crawling to the closet to dig his way out of a tunnel.
Yeah, yeah.
But when they get Marlon to come over there, like he's looking around, like he left behind like a dummy trail, and he has no idea what the hell to say. He looks in the camera and he says, "He's gone." And then
Yeah.
Christoph's like, "Cut!"
I like how there's two quick moments in that scene I really really like. One is Marlon looks into the camera and Christoph says it with this attitude of like it's not the first time he said it, but
Yeah.
Marlon should know better because he's been one of the main cast member. Like he says it
Yeah.
he says it in this very kind of condescending way, like don't look in the camera. And I also love how Paul Giamatti is like cut transmission, like it's just so unprecedented. Like there was always that option, I guess, if something went terribly wrong, but it's like it really feels like it's this moment of gravity where this has never been done before.
Yeah, and the whole world is watching at this point. They're just everybody's scrambling in Sea Haven it's basically like a search party almost.
Yeah.
They're all locking arms. They're walking in at night. They can't find Truman. Kristoff's like, "We need more sun. Just cue the sun." And I love how everyone's checking their watch. Like, what is it? Time already?
Yeah.
Did you pick up this one thing that I think is like a very relevant line for today when one of the producers was like to Christoph, news reporters have like this snapshot of Marlon making an ass in front of himself in front of the camera. And I'm like, oh my God, that's meme culture.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's basically meme culture before that was a household name.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole world is like watch. Yeah, again, the whole world's watching, and eventually Christoph spots Truman on the sailboat. I love how like that's the last place they'd look because they're thinking he's afraid of the water.
Mhm.
And Christoph makes a very harsh choice, and kind of a choice that even his crew members start to think he's going too far on summoning a storm over Truman's boat. And Truman perseveres. And yeah, it's kind of hard to watch. You're seeing sort of a creator kind of abusing his power.
Oh yeah, that scene is like super tense to watch just because there's so many layers to what's going on. You're like you fear for what Truman is going through, but then at the same time it's this weird manipulative thing where it's like, well, it is only happening because this guy is just abusing his power essentially. It's very very cool and creepy.
I think my favorite person that was watching in the real world was the guy in the tub.
In the bathtub. Yeah, that's a very funny addition.
Well, because like, how long was he in that tub for?
Yeah.
That's also a thing I thought of. Like, he was watching it for at least like a whole day, or maybe that's just his spot that he likes to watch his show in. Like, it's funny.
Yeah, yeah. It read to me like it was this kind of little ritualistic thing. Like maybe he flips on his favorite show while he's in the tub. But yeah, you see him in there several times. It's very funny.
There's the Asian couple watching, and then there's the two old ladies, and one of them is like clenching a pillow that has
Yeah.
Truman on it. Like, there's merchandise in the world. Yeah, like, oh, it's really great because it gets so heightened. You're just watching everything now unfold. Like, you're
Yeah.
and Christoph says the most evil line in the whole movie when the producer's like, "You can't let him die in front of a live audience," and he says, "Well, he was born in front of a live audience."
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. You almost like despise him at that point, but again, you sort of like not sympathize. You understand the complexity that's going on with his character.
Totally.
He backs off on the storm, and Truman he's accepting the fact that Truman is about to find out what his life is, and it's such great buildup as the not even the whole world, but the whole control center was watching in that wide shot, and
Hmm.
as Truman like sails his boat, thinking he's going to make it, he rams the boat into the wall, and that's a big tearjerker scene where he's like we said, and you said that was your favorite score throughout the movie.
Yeah, I love that moment.
Yeah, I mean, just now putting into context a little bit like what your life is, like finding that out. It's sad, it's profound, and that initial part where like he puts his hand on the wall and then the camera pans back to him and just that distraught in his face. It's just probably some of the best acting that he's ever done. Like,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and then he kind of walks along the side and then he makes it to these flight of stairs. And before he exits, we get this very obvious sort of god symbolism of Kristoff talking to him amongst the clouds and saying, I'm the creator of a television show.
Yeah.
It's like, again, it's a little on the nose by the end. I get what they're trying to symbolize. It's a tiny bit on the nose, but like I find that line kind of iconic.
Yeah.
Tells Truman the truth. You're the star of this show, and the whole world is watching. And again, that's the pinnacle moment of Kristoff as a character, where he has so much love and admiration for Truman. Like, I've been watching you your whole life. I remember these little moments, like your first day of school, your first steps, the episode when you lost your first tooth, and he laughs. See, like he remembered a moment like that we didn't even see. Like, it means
Yeah.
something to him. But as the whole world is like literally on the edge of their seat, what is Truman going to do? And then that kind of breaks the moment a bit with Kristoff, his ego going, "Say something, God damn it! You're on television, Truman. You're live to everybody." There's a long pause, and it's just like this great tension where it just cuts to literally every extra that we've seen throughout this movie, and also ending with Sylvia. He turns around, and a perfect nice bow. "In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, good night." Takes his bow. Kristoff is just completely speechless. His whole show is over. The entire world cheers. I love the fact that Sylvia is already on her way to go to Truman. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's an incredible ending.
And then the part that you touched upon, or you quizzed me about the last line, it's like people would do that. It's like, after the show's over, all right, what next? What else is
Yeah.
on? It's like, yeah, after that great climactic, like a cinematic moment, it's so memorable too. Like, it's just the way it's shot, the way like the backdrop of just the sky and him taking the bow. It's so great.
Yeah.
And then it's just like this little reminder. Oh, it's a comedy. Throw in a little bit at the end.
Yeah. It would have been funny. I almost want to see the Family Guy parody or like some satirical show show that moment where Truman exits through the door but the door's locked or something.
Actually, what I joked about, and I hope I don't ruin the ending, is that, well, it's established the beginning at the kind of during the True Talk thing that it's a giant dome, and when it was doing that tracking pulling out shot of showing Sea Haven, and then
Yeah.
it shows like a guy stepping through the door in this giant facility. I always picture when Truman just takes one step outside, he's like 100 feet high up, and he just
Yeah.
like slides and falls to his death.
If you don't think too much about how the crew come and go from the set, it's good. But yeah.
But the reaction of everybody watching this show is great because like everybody's watching it now from the exact same point of view, where people are probably watching the Truman Show for many different reasons. They're either completely obsessed, they're either curious to watch it, they're probably hate watching it. But like that last moment was like the first time it felt like the world was united, and it probably felt like everybody was so happy that the fact that he made the right choice to get out in the real world and live
Yeah,
his life. Actually, it's great.
for sure.
Where do you see Truman, like jokes aside, where do you see Truman later on in life, like after that moment he stepped out? Where do you always picture him being?
Well, I think he would be a real celebrity in our world if he was on a show like that for so long.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So the next phase of his life, I guess, he would kind of be reckoning with his fame a little bit still, in a weird way. It's kind of an inversion of the life he's always known.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to think that he does connect with, I'm blanking on her name, the girl.
Oh, Sylvia.
Sylvia, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to think that they connect, and I'd like to think that maybe they end up together. And maybe he starts a real family of his own. And I'd like to think that after everything he learned, maybe the life of celebrity wouldn't be for him. So I'd like to think that he maybe does find some profession that's right for him. But most importantly, I'd like to think that he does fly to Fiji one day. I'd like to think that he does travel there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Like he settles down in
Yeah.
Fiji with Sylvia. That's exactly where I see it going. I also picture like there being a lot of like him trying to suppress the amount of media and attention is probably going to be haunting him for the rest of his life. And my God, the amount of lawsuits that
Yeah.
Christoph and his company are going to go through is like endless. And
Yeah.
his whole life, I mean, as dark as it sounds, I can almost picture Christoph taking his life by the end of his course.
Yeah.
It's as dark as that sounds, but like it seems believable. I picture also Truman tracking down his biological mother and his father, really. Like, I know that it was an unwanted pregnancy that was
Yeah.
established, but
Mhm.
I picture that kind of coming into play a little bit afterwards. And yeah, the simplicity of just him settling down with Sylvia and just trying to make sure that this never happens again, and maybe writing a book about him reflecting on his whole life. But
Yeah.
I hope they both live to be an elderly 90-year-old couple, and they live their life, because he still has like a good 2/3 of his life still to live. And that happens, then he would sort of look back on the first third of his life as just being just like that kind of weird big hump that he had to get past.
Yeah. I think that's the really beautiful thing about this movie is like when you meet him, he's a guy who's kind of maybe having a quarter to midlife crisis, and he's he thinks he's stuck there forever.
Yeah.
But really, it's only the start of his life, really.
Yeah, the movie starts and it finishes at like the perfect moment too, and it's nicely paced.
Oh yeah.
It's a great example of direction on what to show and what not to show, and I think
Mhm.
Peter Weir knocks it out of the park with this one. Any sort of final thoughts you want to?
Yeah, so I'm not particularly one for ranking films or categorizing films or kind of pitting them against each other. I love reading about it. I'm just not really a guy who does it a lot. But I always point to this as one of my favorite movies. Like, this is a movie I can watch again and again and just get the same effect every time. And it's a premise that's just so well done and so well executed, and I think the fact that it inspired a generation of film goers to kind of question their own reality and existence and stuff
Exactly.
is just a testament to what a good concept it is. And yeah, honestly, I find it to be a practically perfect movie. I definitely think it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think, as you said, it feels like such a nice light watch just on the surface. Like there's a nice sort of like gentle vibe you get out of the movie, even though it is a sort of a high concept,
Yeah.
but it's an original concept. It's not based on a book. It's not based on anything. It just came from an imaginative idea that was passed down. It was great casting.
Yeah.
It was thought provoking. It's funny. I think the standout for me, I mean, you probably look at it definitely from a performance standpoint, but like this is one of my top 3 favorite directed movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I always notice more and more every time I watch it. I mean, we definitely did more of a deep dive with this, which I'm happy that we did, and I hope that we've taught some of our viewers something that they might not have picked up on. But it is a light watch, and to many people, they probably look at it that way. But it's a film that's deep. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of subtle things. It's a film that also taught me about just backstory behind your own characters, even if it's not implied in the film.
Yeah.
It just, the more depth that you add on to characters, the more that you're not going to have such a flat line, and your cast is going to have something to work with, and it's going to create something there. And I'd recommend this movie to anybody who's just getting into film, not only just like watching movies to get into filmmaking, but if you like, say you probably know somebody that's not really a film buff and they want to just watch films. I'd say by the time that they've watched just like the ones that you gotta watch before you die or whatever, and like the accessible ones, I'd say this is a great gateway thinker movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Because there's a lot more movies out there that are definitely more deep and you have to think about it a little bit more, and it takes like numerous rewatches. This is more like easy, but it's so simple, but again, it works in its simplicity, so
Yeah.
that's why it's so masterful.
It feels like it's like entrenched enough in pop culture that if someone says something is like the Truman Show, you exactly know what they're going for. Even if they're not comparing it to another movie, they're like, if you just say like, I feel like I'm in the Truman Show, and it did in in fact give rise to a particular kind of syndrome. Like psychiatrists have cited this movie as like a notable thing that they've recognized in people's psyche, a sort of
Yeah,
detachment from
well,
the real world.
did you look up that thing that people like psychiatrists noticed that there were patients that had schizophrenia that believed that their lives were within a reality show, and they called that the Truman syndrome?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That I was reading about that yesterday. Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's I mean, I feel bad. I hope they get the help that they need, but like it's crazy when like they name a syndrome after a film. And I think actually the screenwriter Andrew Nichol said, well, you made a successful movie when they name a syndrome after it.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think we can definitely call that a day. I'd love to have you back on the show someday, man.
For sure. I really appreciate you having me on the show today.
Thank you everybody for listening. Click the like, throw in a comment, and subscribe to So to Speak, and I'll see you on the next Pop Talk.
In case I don't see you,
Good afternoon
good evening.
and good night. Cease transmission.